Fall meeting.
Evening, board members and members of the community. Welcome to our March 27th MSA D60 budget workshop. I'd like to remind you there is no public input tonight. It's a working session for the board. So please listen, write down your questions, and there'll be plenty of time next week for our public input. So let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, and I'm going to turn over to Superintendent Beauvais now.
Thank you. The goal for this evening is really to look at and address some of the questions that were lingering or came up last week, and then talk about our next steps, because next Thursday, we ideally and absolutely should be working on the final draft of the budget so that we can keep to our timeline for our May hearing and then our vote in June. So again, those are our goals. We've set about 90 minutes again. I was not a good timekeeper last time, but I will just give a reminder at 8 o'clock. And we'll go from there. And if we need to go over the time, that, I think that's important because we do have that priority to get as much done as we absolutely can. So why don't we just start right away with some of the questions that came up. So what we have for questions, or at least further discussion, is class size. There was a question about the administrative impact to the budget, further discussion on Excel, assistant principals, and kindergarten jumpstart. I think we still have some discussion around that as well. And then we will go into some additional things that we have discussed and made as far as cuts, and we can talk about the revenue part of that. And then to Lauren's question, which we always appreciate, is what does the percent impact show per $1,000 per a home, so or a property. So we'll do our best to go through all of that. So why don't we just start talking about class size? And there's our handouts, so just bear with me because there's a lot of handouts.
Thank you, Jen.
So on this front part of this document is if we went with the reconfiguration. So these are the enrollments for the reconfiguration. And how they are listed is by school, and then by the total amount of students in that school, right next to the school name, and then the grade levels in that school, the amount of students per grade level, and then the sections, and then the class size. So for example, at Huzzy School, we have the pre-K, 32 students for that, 2 sections, 16 students each in each section. Peg and Nancy, I did share these with you earlier today, so if you have a moment to open those documents up. Okay. So I think there was just, I'll give you a moment to look at those because I think that was what the question was, just what things were going to look like. And on the back of that page is guidelines that we've used for when we've worked on the budget. We always talk about how we start with a zero-based budget, but we also start with these guidelines so that when our administrators and staff are working on the budget, they have these guidelines to go by as far as if they need to downsize a staff member or a section in a particular grade, or upsize it, adding a new staff member or a new teacher to a grade level. And these guidelines have historically, and they're kind of long-standing. We don't go through them every single year and make huge shifts, but what we do is we look at each grade level, look at those students that are in the grade level. For example, in kindergarten, some years we may have students with more mobility issues than other years. We want to make sure that classrooms are accessible for all of our students and there's not huge overcrowding for students so that they can get through the space. So we look at it in those terms. We also have taken direction from the board in the past, and the board has discussed and had conversations about where particular class sizes should be or moving ahead that way. So those are the guidelines that we use this year for the next year. So for fiscal year 26.
Do these class sizes at the schools that have the self-contained Fuzzy and Hanson, do they include the self-contained kids in it? So they would be quite a bit smaller for most of the instructional day then, is that correct? Do we have any idea how many?
Depends.
Right, could we get, without violating any confidentiality, could we get a number on the self-contained students in each? I think it's the, if I'm not mistaken, at the elementary level, just Hanson and Huzzy have the self-contained classroom.
And Knowlton, currently Knowlton.
Knowlton still has?
Yes.
Okay, I didn't know that. So can we get those numbers so we can get a sense of what these numbers actually do?
Mhm.
Because they do alter a little bit.
And it depends on the student, right? Because some students, even though they may be self-contained, they're going in for literacy and math, or they're going in for a good portion of social studies and science, or they're in for half a day, you know. So yes, we can give you some of that information.
I know it's too complicated. Thank you. Thank you. Keep an eye on this one.
Thank you.
I don't know if this is supposed to answer my question that I've asked 2 weeks in a row.
So your question was about Lebanon?
Well, it was number of fourth graders that would be at each one of the, so I guess basically North Berwick and LES. Yeah.
So these are the numbers
Okay.
for Lebanon. So just Lebanon's numbers, and I can pull up North Berwick for you.
Okay.
Yeah, I can do it.
Thank you.
Audrey, I'll say certainly, I appreciate these numbers. These numbers really help. I don't know if the board wants to have serious discussion about, class sizes. I hear crickets, you know, among board members. I know it's not popular. I also know that, you know, during discussions with associations, as we have to as boards, we've been told that they understood that contract increases would result in class sizes increasing, but I don't hear board members saying it here. It's like we say it in one spot, but we're not willing to say it in another spot. So I'm really curious as a board, is this the conversation we're going to have, or is this the conversation that we're going to say in one area that we're going to do it, but then we're not going to do it? So I'm asking, are we going to have the conversation, or is it just going to be silent?
I think that we asked for what we were looking at. I think that these numbers, for the most part, fall in line with what we expect to see. So I think that's my assumption of why the conversation is a little bit quiet. Don't love some of North Berwick numbers, which are a little bit high for that, but looking at this, like, I don't know how else that you would split it without having like 11 kids in class. So
But are you saying, Josh, that we need to have a discussion about making these numbers higher so that we can eliminate positions?
Yeah, I mean, I know that those conversations have been had with associations, that the understanding was when they're negotiating contracts, we're like, there is no way that we're gonna be able to continue with this contract, with class sizes being as they are, like, as they are.
Is that true? Were teachers told that in negotiations this year? I've never heard that in negotiations previously.
my interpretation of all the conversations were that we might be at the high end of what we as a district feel is appropriate, but not that there were going to be like way high increases in numbers, but that would be at the high end, but I don't want to speak. That was my interpretation or impression of the whole conversation.
I have a question. So these numbers though, are they based on an estimate of what we were planning on for the rate? Like, is this based on the raises that we're working on right now? And
The salary?
For this, yeah.
We haven't ratified the contract yet. We're still working through the.
Well, yeah, I know, but based on our like estimate of where it's headed, or do we have a new number? Is that what you're trying to say, Josh?
No, it was my understanding, and please forgive me if I am wrong, then please tell me I am wrong. But what I thought I heard during our discussions as a board is, as negotiations were happening, they were told that we would have to cut programs or increase class sizes in order to make this happen. And if I misunderstood that, then please tell me I misunderstood that.
I think you misunderstood that. I think we've always been pretty straightforward with the negotiation team without going into detail, but very clearly said at the beginning of this budget cycle that we were probably going to have to downsize by 18 headcount. And that would include some student-facing employees, teachers.
So we assume, thank you. So we're assuming that based on where we're headed with negotiations right now, these numbers are gonna stay the same. This is what
This is what we're looking
so
at.
if we count, okay.
And Audra, is this a recommended number from the Maine Department of Education or?
Some of it are national, when you
National.
look, and some of it is data. Look, you can look at data points differently, right? But what we look at is our student population and where our needs are with our students and what programs we're offering our students. That's primarily how we go about that.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
So, yes, sure. So for North Berwick, for fifth grade would be sending 42 students. And then for fourth grade, they would have 57 students.
Thank you.
Yes.
Say the fifth grade number again, sorry, please.
Which numbers? Okay, so
Fifth grade North Berwick.
42 going to fifth grade,
Yep.
57 going into fourth.
I just wanted to say I'm a little bit concerned. We haven't ratified the teacher's contract. I don't think we've ratified what's that? I don't think we're finished with negotiations, and I think some of the conversation is it shouldn't even be had yet because most of about what we said, what we were dealing with. I just think we're out of line on that right now. to
I
say-
agree with you, Nancy. I 100% agree with that.
Thank you.
So, like next year, would it make sense? Like, would we all feel better if we just redo these numbers and verify them at the beginning of next year to make sure they kind of stay in line and look good for everyone again at the beginning of the year?
The guidelines or the actual numbers?
The actual numbers.
Okay. We do that when we go through the monthly enrollment in the beginning of the year. We often talk through, we talk about in October enrollments and we go through that, but we can certainly make a point of highlighting that again.
Okay.
Sorry to bring this back up again, but from my experience with the numbers, when we talk about, again, the self-contained classrooms, I would really like to see how those self-contained kids are impacting the overall numbers in the regular ed environment, because, if the numbers go down dramatically, then we want to address that in some way, would be my opinion. Just thinking. I don't have that information, so I can't, I'm not even sure if it would be your job, but I really think that we need to look at if they're coming in for art and music and not for academics, or they're just coming in for 20, whatever they are, and I have no idea. But we want to look at those numbers, because if the numbers drop down to 11 kids in a classroom, then I definitely want to consolidate classrooms.
So one thing I can say to you is that particularly with kindergarten, because some kindergarten, sometimes we have our best estimate based on what the trajectory has been. So there have been times in kindergarten when we've had to increase a class size.
I would like to remove my consideration for kindergarten.
But also we've had times when we've decreased
Right.
based on actual
Right.
enrollments.
That's a-
We are flexible.
Yep.
That, and we've done that historically,
Yep,
not
no.
just with kindergarten, but some other grade levels.
I just would really like to see not K, 1, 2, and 3, 4, because I know that those numbers can, they can change a lot.
Nancy, could I ask a favor for myself? It's a Mickey the Dunce question, but also for some of our community members. Could you explain what a self-contained classroom is? 10 words or less.
No, I'm going to defer to Audra, but in my building, the self-contained classroom, the kids were contained within the unit. They went out for phys ed on occasion. If it was appropriate, they'd go to phys ed or they'd go to art, because we wanted them to socialize whenever we could, but they were self-contained. They were what's the new one? Intellectually impaired, I believe is the coding. So they weren't necessarily
Okay.
in the academic placement. I think over time that we have behavioral self-contained classrooms now that I was not privy to. So they may be different. So I don't know, but that's my definition. Self-contained is there within that unit. We take them out, we teach them functioning life skills rather than academic skills. So Audra, you can correct me on that.
I'm going to defer to Melissa Adams.
Jump in for a second. So the way we categorize our IEPs is kids who are in a mainstream setting, 80% of the time or higher, 40 to 79% of the time, or less than 40% of the time. So those are our three sort of IEP classifications. We have roughly 16 kids K to 5 in that less than 40% mainstream setting. I don't think, and I would have to double check, that we really have any children that are 0% in a mainstream setting. So all of our kids, we are pushing up in some way into classrooms.
Thank you very much.
And can I ask, so are those included then in the numbers that are on this document?
They are.
Okay, thank you.
Nancy, do you need any more specific follow-up, or did Melissa give you with those numbers of 16 students?
Yeah, I'd still like to the breakdown. And yes, please. And the different, because we've got 3 different schools too, and it might be that just.
Any further discussion on class size at the moment?
Just reiterating what I said about, I don't love the numbers for North Berwick, especially considering because of that question, Nancy, they're the only pre-K to 3 that does not have a self-contained program at all. So those kids are in those classes and not leaving. Just awareness, I don't know how I would redo this, so.
North Berwick has historically been the school because they have lower enrollment anyway. So if you're cutting, then they get to 25. If you add, then there's been several years that they've been at 12, 11, 13, 14, when other schools are at 19.
Yeah.
So it is always tricky.
Audra, for kids in North Berwick that require self-contained classroom, aren't they sent to Hussey?
Hussey or Lebanon, yes. Or Knowlton School, yes. Yeah.
Is kindergarten what's registered so far or predicted?
On here?
Yeah.
It's predicted.
Okay.
Yes. Most schools start that coming up in the next couple of weeks. Yeah. Mhm. And again, that's when we can shift. Like if we are in July and we're seeing one school not having the projected numbers that we look at, we analyze that and go through that and make shifts if we need to. So every week we're looking at kindergarten enrollment numbers.
Thank you.
Okay, do you want to just talk a little bit about KJS? One of the questions that came up was just about, is there a way to run as an interim step, because we haven't implemented pre-K, is there a way to run one KJS classroom this year, like this summer, centrally located for all three of the towns? So we kind of looked at those numbers, and to run one classroom would be $12,000. To run the busing for one program would be upwards of $30,000.
Is there existing busing for that though?
Yes,
Oh, there is?
we always have busing. We put busing in for that.
Okay. I will say, knowing that was one of my things, I did my due diligence and I talked to a lot of parents, and a lot of teachers and preschool teachers. And I've heard very mixed reviews about how important it is, and that it really, as you had said, can be done in a kindergarten classroom. So I don't have a strong feeling as I did personally. I don't know what anyone else thinks.
Okay. The next question was about Excel. Do you want to talk a little bit about, you had started, and we'll just continue that conversation.
Right. So I am definitely, I mean, I think we should really be beefing up our Excel program in general. They're like the top 1 to 3% of the kids in the school, and we want to really give them all the support so we can start getting them into those, like, you know, top tier colleges. These kids are mostly college bound. I've had some good discussions with teachers in the school. And what I would really love to see is a meeting at the beginning of every year in lieu of an administrator for this year, where we're discussing every opportunity that's available per grade to the Excel kids all at once with the whatever coach they're working with. I think it would be a great use of time for everyone just to get us all in one room. It would build community within the Excel community. And yeah, I just want to see all those opportunities laid out at the beginning of the year for the kids.
Any other further discussion about Excel?
I know we've talked about this before, but what are the number of students, the percentage of students that we're allowed or supposed to have in the program?
3 to 5%.
3 to 5, okay.
So I just want to be clear though, I do hope long-term we are aiming for an administrative role for this. I do think it's warranted. I understand it's not achievable in this budget. But I just think long-term, we really need to like hone in on our really celebrating academic achievement at the school.
We do the COGAT to determine eligibility. I turned it on. So is there any chance, out of curiosity more than anything else, could we get the percentage of kids who are in the 1 to 3%, that upper 5% range? You know, the well above average to superior range that Excel was intended to target back in the day when it was intended to target those kids. I'm just curious as to how many kids in our district. I think it would be 5th grade was the last time they took it, so last year's 5th grade. How many of those kids are actually in that well above to superior range that isn't?
And I just want to speak to that a little bit because there's 4 different, there's like the teacher recommendation, the standardized test, parent recommendation, and then one other qualifier that I'm forgetting about right now. But it is like a more well-rounded look at the student than just the national test. So yeah, I don't know.
I realize that the district has the option of taking on more kids if they want to, but Excel was targeted for that well above to superior range where they are not getting all of the academic needs met. Back in the day, I don't know. It's a bit morphed into more of It's kind of like our special ed programs more, but it was targeted for a specific group of very high functioning kids that were not doing well because they were bored to death in the academics. I think that was, well, it was actually a political, because if we were going to do special ed, we had to do the other end too. So just wanted to get that out there so that we are all on the same page with the intent. I'm holding it down. I had to learn so much. They never put me within cell, never.
Any further discussion on Excel right now? Okay, the next question is, I'm going to just read it and then give the answer. So this was an emailed question that everybody received. So what is the increased cost, salary, longevity, insurances, tuition, et cetera, all costs of the administrative contract for the entire district for the 25-26 school year over the 24-25 fiscal year? Sorry, so they both school year and then fiscal year. So for next year, it's a 2.09% increase, which is $62,300.
Can you repeat the last number, please?
62,000.
Okay, thank you.
And Audra, you don't need to do it now, but I think it'd be helpful to know what percent of the budget that is.
We'll work on that right now.
Yeah.
Thank you.
With that, because we know that there was a big jump in insurance estimates for this year, I would also be curious of how much of it is benefits that were, like, how much of that cost was benefits versus salary? Not the second.
Maybe the next second.
No, it's just a thought of that number. What does that number really look like? What does it really represent?
So it's 0.12%.
Thank you.
Okay. And then do we want to take an estimate on the benefits, or?
I will have to do it by
Okay.
person and get it to you
Okay.
next.
Yeah,
Okay.
no rush. And it can just be general. I just want to know what that number really represents.
So along those lines, there was a question about further discussion around assistant principals. This is the job description for the assistant principals at the elementary level. I believe there was a desire to have a conversation around assistant principals. So
I know, earlier this year, right around when I first joined the board, we had a discussion about this. And I did a lot of research on it because I wasn't really sure where I stood. And it seems like across the board, the trend is to move to more assistant principals, in K through 12 and especially in the younger grades. It just helps with attrition. It helps with so many different things. I mean, and for most of these schools, we're talking a half-time assistant principal anyways. So I think if we're talking about like, being ahead of the game, we need to be bringing up those assistant principals and getting them ready. Should a principal leave, we're going to have somebody hopefully that's right in line to take that spot and no disruption to the students at all.
I agree. I fully support the assistant principal positions, and I think they are a front line against bullying, which remains one of our biggest concerns. I still would like to hear from the middle school how those positions have helped with that. I'm still seeing a lot on social media about concerns about bullying at the middle school.
I look at the job description and it's pretty intense. And as you said, we have in several cases proposed half-time. Want to talk about how detailed and intense and the job responsibilities, how weighty they are for a half-time person.
I agree, Kate. And finding somebody who's willing to do that for a halftime position is a mystery to me. Why somebody takes that at a halftime is a mystery to me.
Yeah, I guess I agree too, Peg.
Yeah, and just to reiterate back on this of seeing these numbers and knowing that North Berwick isn't that much, that's 30 kids less than Lebanon, 31 kids less than Lebanon with no assist or help from Hussey's assistant principal. Seeing Hussey at 140 to 170 kids more to even think that person is going to have time. I think all schools should have at least a halftime assistant principal at minimum.
I agree. Fully support that.
I think that it's lovely and wonderful to have extra staffing. It always is, well, sometimes it doesn't, sometimes the more staff you have, the less work gets done. But that's just another story. I think it's great, but can we afford all of these administrators? That's what we have to ask ourselves. Not do we want them, but can we afford them? What is the budget going to do to the residents of these towns? Yes, it would be wonderful. It'd be wonderful to have full-time assistant principals in every school. They will come in handy. They always do. But can we afford it? We've asked ourselves that repeatedly during this entire budget season or what's going on. I mean, that's really what we have to ask. Can we afford it? Or can we make a sacrifice or ask our administrators to make a sacrifice when we have 250 kids in a school? Can that principal manage it with maybe a second secretary if they need to have pay? I don't know. It's a lot cheaper to hire assistant secretary or a secretary than it is to hire assistant principal. Not saying that the assistant principals don't do the work, because they do. I'm saying that, but can we afford to fill these schools with the assistant principals? Can we afford to hire new principals? I mean, we don't have principals. I know everybody has a principal, but just something to think about.
My concern is what happened last year. And my concern is that if we cut in too many places, we're going to end up putting more back than we care to at the public hearing. And I know that we can't be afraid of that and put the budget up ridiculously, but I do think that in places where parents are going to express concern, and I think this may be one of them, with the number of parents on social media complaining about bullying in this district, I think if we appear to be taking away supports for that issue, we're going to be in trouble.
The whole issue of bullying really impacts the learning atmosphere for every student. And if we're concerned and committed to raising academic standards, it's kind of a catch-22 when it comes to, well, do we want to pay our teachers to stay here so we have the best? Do we want to have that person, that assistant principal available in each of the school so that they can deal with bullying and behavior problems, which impact the classroom? It really is hard. I mean, I hear what you're saying. I get that tax bill too. But it's a hard
I'm a data
issue.
person. we've asked for the data for the entire year to see what this bullying, what we're doing with the middle school. We've been asking during the code of conduct for that data. And I'm a data, I want black and white data. I don't want opinions. I don't want social media. I want data. So are the assistant principals really impacting the bullying? Is the bullying as serious and significant as we're being told on social media? I don't know. But I know that when I was in the school, a lot of times what was going on in the school was not what you heard about on social media. I want data. But I also want to say that if that's one area, that's one expense that we might be able to look at much more carefully, at least for the time being, until, I hate to bring it up, but we still have a $2.7 million concern floating around out there that we've got to absorb at some point. And where can we cut back? Every little bit helps on the cutback. And that's just, I'm old and I just know that we need to be careful. I'm not going to go out and buy a latte. I can't afford it.
Two things I want to address. Yes, I completely agree with your statement, Nancy, or what you're saying is that, many hands make light work or whatever the saying is. I also think it's important to note, this assistant principal job description, you need a master's degree to do this. This is not just a person to help, tell the kids which way to go. This is a trained person. So I think that it's important to clarify that we're talking, I get what you're saying, but this person is very different than just another body in a school. And then Elena just kind of whispered, didn't Mr. A come in and, did I imagine this? Didn't Mr. A come in with the data and share a whole presentation about the middle school in progress? Okay, I'm just making sure I'm not crazy. Okay.
And there have been conversations at the Code of Conduct Committee about that, to your point. Yes.
Yes.
But I know you like data.
I like
working.
real black and white stuff. Makes me more comfortable.
Mike, could you share that presentation with the board again? If there are supporting slides?
And Mike, did you want to say a few words?
Can Mike, I think what we're asking for is it in writing. We like to refer to it, right? We like to look at it because when people are posting stuff on social media, well, you've come in, you've presented that data, but we don't have it in writing.
Spoken to every parent who's posted on social media. I want to be clear about that. And obviously it's purpose stuff and there's individual cases, so I can't get into it, but I would just say that social media is a place where people vent, and I understand that. And I will tell you that every administrator here spends all day long talking to parents, talking to students, working things out. And I would so I've been so many areas that we can talk about here, but I would say that I've heard from this board that the goal is so teachers can teach and students can learn. And I will tell you that if you cut assistant principals, that is a disingenuous statement. This is not sustainable. When I was a principal at North Berwick Elementary School my first year, so 8 years ago, I got all my supervision evaluation done before December. I didn't have a behavioral referral until December. And I can tell you that when I left there, and there was maybe one tricky kid in the whole school. And when I left there were 2 to 3 per classroom. And I don't think that people understand that there is no get them out of the classroom, kick them out of school. The courts have said that you cannot suspend students who are 6th grade or younger than 6th grade. The most heinous crimes that people can do, that little kids can do, they still stay in school. 3-day maximum suspension. You have to understand, talk to any parent of a 5-year-old in a kindergarten, in any of our kindergarten classrooms, talk to any kindergarten teacher and ask them, are there really challenging kids? Who spends the day with those kids? Who talks to those parents? Who sets up those meetings? Who circles back? You have to talk. There's so much time. I'm telling you that the administration cannot work harder than we're working. And if you cut assistant principals, it's not a luxury. It's not. I understand. I understand the budget line. Hourly, hour to hour, it's not significantly more. And I will tell you also, sorry if I'm on, please hold up a red card. We are not villains. We work with staff. This is our team. We are together. We are not on some Eiffel Tower. These are our partners. We are support staff to the teachers, to the bus drivers, to the custodians, the cafeteria staff. We work together. So it's not those administrators and those comfy jobs. Nope, we are always doing all the extra. We are the wild cards. We are the ones. There is no contract day. Look at us. We're here. We're here every time. We are here on weekends. It doesn't matter. We are the wild cards. There is no other position in the district that is a wild card except administration. When you need us, we are here. When a parent needs us, we're here. Like I talk to people. I get to school at about 6 o'clock every single morning. 5 o'clock is typically I'm 11 hours a day, and that's scheduled. And then when there are things going on, it's more than that. Like, you have to understand, that's what everybody is doing. We are on the same team. And like, if we believe that teachers can teach, teachers need to teach, and students need to learn, you need to have assistant principals.
Thanks, Mike. I'm glad you did that, because and my daughter was in a classroom where she was actually stabbed with a pencil in first grade, and exactly what you're saying is happening. We had police come to our house. They had to cordon the classroom off as a crime scene. The kid destroyed the classroom in the process. These first grade kids were interviewed by police. It was insane. And teachers all promised them that this kid would not be back in the classroom. But guess what? They left him home, made him stay home for a couple days. And when they went back in the classroom, guess who was there? Because legally they could not throw him out. So and that was vice principal, did a ton of work with that situation. So I am 100. And Mike, I want to say something else to address the social media thing. I totally get it. I'm not saying any of these things are true or real, but what happens is it gets the entire town. Now that we have these town threads, it gets everybody in the town wound up. And so what I'm concerned about is that is the narrative that's out there, particularly for people who don't have kids in the school and have no other connection or way of knowing what's going on. And so when that public hearing comes, that's what they're thinking. And we have no control over what happens at that public hearing. So if what we're doing and we're talking about is taking away the supports that help schools deal with bullying, and we're talking about taking it away, what the narrative is in the communities right now, right or wrong, is that bullying is a huge problem in our schools. And I think we'll end up putting them back and putting them back at a bigger size than we may be thinking now is affordable, or maybe not affordable, but whatever. I totally agree. I'll be quiet. Thank you, Mike.
Mr. Marco, I appreciate you coming up here, and saying what you said. I mean, I'm the one that's said the comment over and over again, providing culture and an environment where teachers can teach and students can learn. And I don't believe it's disingenuous at all, to suggest that my career, was somehow false. I have done this, and I hate going back on my experience, but I can't deny that experience was my life. I did all the things that are on this list, and all the things that are on the principal list, because ironically, it's the same list. You didn't know. It's the same list. Okay. Yes, I did all the events. I didn't have IEP coordinators. I attended every single IEP meeting. I did every discipline. I called every parent. I worked with every single teacher in 2 buildings that were as far apart as Huzzy and Lebanon. I used my staff. You're right. We have a team. The teachers were awesome. They were fantastic. My school counselor was fantastic. We utilized our team. We're not saying that, hey, that assistant principals aren't useful. Sure, they're useful. Of course. Would my job have been easier if I had an assistant principal? Sure. Is the job unmanageable without one? Not with 250 students. And that's just a statement of fact. It's not a feeling.
That's a statement of fact in your experience.
No, the University of Maine has done the research on this, and they've put out research to the state of Maine. They studied it in the state of Maine, and they said elementary schools do not need an assistant principal until they've reached a student enrollment of 305 students. Our numbers right here on this sheet are 231 for North Berwick, 262 for Hanson, and 244 for Knowlton. I'll leave it at that.
I just think it's important to remember that not every district, every school, every year is the same. I think we've all seen, and you just pointed out, Mr. Ray, the change over the last 8 years of the student population that we're seeing is incredibly different than I think what a lot of us saw before. I can say I've waitressed at one restaurant and I've waitressed at another restaurant and had 2 completely different experiences. In one restaurant, I could handle 10 tables, no problem. The other restaurant, 4 was the max. And it's the clientele, it's how the place is, it's a number of factors. I've worked for restaurants who had the same owners. And so same leadership, but completely different. Same thing. This is not apples to apples, and we appreciate all of your experiences, but I don't think it's fair to say because it worked where you were, it's going to work for Noble.
I think that's fair. I don't discount that. That's true. The other thing I would say is when we talk about bullying, right? Whenever I hear bullying is an adult problem. It's not a kid problem. It's an adult problem, right? And that's the way I always talked about it when I was a building principal. It is an adult problem. In my classroom right now, there is no bullying in my classroom. Because when the little things come up, it's dealt with hard, fast, immediately. Right? That's how it has to be dealt with. Now it's a little bit, I'm at high school level versus elementary. It is a little bit different, but bullying is an adult problem. If there's bullying in our buildings, then our adults, for whatever reason, there's something that's not working right. And we need to figure it out. It's not a condemnation. It's not a finger point. It's a, who can take care of it? Us as adults. In the community, I get stuff. I live on a main road. I get stuff tossed over my fence all the time. But we can say that's bullying all the time. I'm bullied all the time. I don't stand and say I'm bullied all the time. People have opinions. Okay. Right? And we can do that as adults. We can work with our kids. And I know that's a lot of the things that people are doing. I am fully aware of that. Bullying, I don't know that bullying is different. I think our reaction to it is different for sure.
Josh, can I back you up? Did you say you would lean on your deans?
Oh, excuse me?
When you were talking about what you did all by yourself with no vice principal, did you say you would pull in your dean?
No, I had no deans. I worked with the school counselor and teachers.
Thought
Those
that
are the only two things I had. I had a school counselor and classroom teachers.
Thought I
I
heard
did
you
not
say-
have literacy specialists. I did not have math coaches. I did not have a whole other layer of support staff. I had
I
those
got
two.
you. You did it all by yourself.
No, I'm just saying that's the way the districts are set up, and we were highly successful.
You may have had a different group of students. I mean, socioeconomic
For you, we were
matters.
not.
Culture matters. I think we are living in towns that are struggling. And like Berwick, we have a ton of transient families, and I think they come in with problems, and I don't think it's as simple as what you experienced. And you are very fortunate. I'm very happy for you.
Unfortunately, I think our young people have to be carefully taught, and that teaching starts at home. And a lot of the angst and anger that is happening in the community and in the state and in the nation transmits to the classroom. And so I think it's a joint problem. You may say it's an adult problem, but it is a joint problem. It's got to be the families involved as well as the teaching staff and the administration. But again, where the culture is ugly, when the narrative is negative, I don't think we step back from the problem. I think we need to address it.
I agree.
Something that I would like to just express, because you made me think of it, Kate, is when we put the parents, and I hope we don't, and I don't know that we will, but if we put the parent in these communities struggling to pay their taxes, we will increase the angst in the children. We need to be aware that this is not the time to be, if we can cut back on something, and I'm not saying it's the assistant principals or the guy, I'm just saying we have a hefty budget, and if we don't, and I've been saying it for a long time, you've heard me many, many times say the same thing. We need to be careful, especially this year when everything is upside down, because we don't need parents getting more unhappy with their taxes or their lack of income. Money is really the root. These kids are going to come in. I don't want to say anymore about it. It's just my huge concern. And I think, Audra, didn't you tell me that Lebanon is one of our low-income schools, towns?
Lebanon is a Title I school.
Title I school, thank you. So, they're hurting already. Our town we don't need to have 7,000 people hurting more and messing and upsetting the kids, because when the parents are ugly, it reflects on the kids. And that's what happens. We all know that. Thank you.
Nancy, I struggled with that last year at that public hearing. Where were they? I mean, I really struggled with that because, yeah, I totally agree. But that's not what we're seeing in reality is people want more for their kids' education. I totally hear you, though.
I just worry. I'm just worried. You know, if we can cut back, as I said,
We worked really hard last year to get our budget down to what we felt as a board was reasonable. And there was a parent group who overrode our final budget. So we listened to them, we implemented what they requested, and we added that money back to the budget.
and I would remind us all.
That's not optional. We had no choice.
We-
Is what it is.
When the town votes in the extra money, the board does not have to use it in the manner in which it was voted. And I think you guys, I heard that was said at the meeting. It could have been set aside and used down the road. It does not have to be used. That's the one thing that, you know, again, if you have the towns coming in and raising the budget, maybe we shouldn't jump to give them what they want, so they stop raising the budget. Because the budget was very carefully done, and then all of a sudden it was a $300,000 increase. I wasn't on the board last year, but I did listen, and I just saying.
I can't
North-
imagine what would happen if we did that.
Oh, teachers, people get angry and then they move on. That's what happens. It happened to me, happened to us. It happens over in Farmington.
So I think if we're bringing it back to like the assistant principal position, it's our job to listen to the teachers, right? And the most highly educated teachers in our district are the principals that are telling us they need assistant principals. So I don't think it's negotiable this year. That's my stance on it. I think we need to keep the assistants in place that we have. It really is, if you look at the administrative, what they just talked about. I have like echo on this, but I don't know if you hear it. Okay. If we look at what the administrative cost really is as the percentage of the total budget, it's not a line item that's breaking the bank. That's not what's making people's taxes go up. The that position just is not impacting people hugely every year. So I think we need to like definitely work on making a 5 to 10 year plan. Definitely work on budgeting for the future. That's obviously a concern. And I love that you identified that socioeconomic issues within the towns put a burden on how kids learn, because that's so important. But I just don't think this is where we need to aim. And if we're going based on what our principals are saying, this is not an appropriate place to cut.
I just want to do a time check here. We're at 50 minutes, which means we have 40 if we're going to stick to the 90 minutes. So,
Any further discussion
This question? I have a question. Are
on
we,
this particular item?
I've said all right.
And you had another question?
Are we still? I have some questions I'd like to ask, but I don't know when that would come up in the process.
Okay.
Just let me know.
So if this discussion is done, we can move into just general questions, and then we can talk about some additional areas that we found since last week to this week. As Denise mentioned, we're continually looking at the budget, and we've spent a very long time. So we do have some items that we have combed through, and we'll be able to talk through some of that as well. So go ahead.
One of the things that has come to my attention is the, this is very similar to last year. Does the budget reflect, I wrote it down so I could get it right. Does the budget reflect the reduced salary costs of the, reduced workload for the specialists working in the potential pre-K3 schools and the grade 4 school? So have we reduced their salary, based on their reduced workload?
That is part of the reconfiguration information that we shared last week. Yes,
But we are reducing their salaries and their benefits.
We are.
To their,
that's part of the reconfiguration. Yes, yeah.
I want to just clarify. I don't think a salary was reduced. I think the places people were and the number of people needed was adjusted.
Yes.
Salaries were not reduced though.
Correct.
Okay. Makes sense?
So we're moving staff, we're moving the specialists around so that their workload is going to be. We're not gonna go through what you guys went through last year, where you have teachers working 11 units a week and working in the school as a,
The reconfiguration is addressing that concern.
okay, so we gotta wait for that to see how that's gonna work.
Yes, but I will tell you that we are in agreement that we do not want, some workloads to be that vastly different.
Thank you.
I have two questions. One, I haven't figured out how to ask this question for weeks. Excuse me. So I guess I'll just ask it the best way I can. I've heard from multiple teachers who are unhappy with a particular literacy consulting service that our district has had for a long time. So much so, I'm aware that some staff members have left our school district. Good teachers have left our school district because of this. I believe they've been working in the district for around a decade or so. And from what I can tell, they've earned about $500,000. Are we continuing with the service? And if we are continuing with the service, what's the justification for continuing, even though our staff is, I haven't talked to everybody, obviously, but I've heard from a number, they are really unhappy with this service.
I'm not sure that this is appropriate for open forum, maybe more appropriate for an executive session, because it has to deal with salary and contracts.
They're not our employee, correct?
No, contracted service.
Contracted services.
Contracted service. So, I mean, if we need to go into executive session, I'm amenable to that and scheduling that so we can have that discussion. I didn't know how else to ask it. I would defer to our superintendent to tell us whether it's executive session necessary or here.
I can give some general information, and if there needs to be more further details, we can talk about how to do that. So overall, our district does have a consultant that we've used for literacy. It has not been 10 years throughout the district. There's been different years for different schools. Part of the reason why we shifted from literacy coaching to a consultant is because we had an exodus of some literacy coaches due to attrition. It was purely attrition. And then we had trouble finding literacy coaches coming in. So we relied on a literacy coach to help bring continuity. Part of literacy coaching, what we found also was that in the different towns, the literacy coaches we did not have the consistency that we needed among the 3 towns because we had literacy coaches in each building. So that caused some differences in the way that coaching was occurring and the way that staff were being given information and official coaching was happening. So that was a piece of that. So that when we did have 3 openings at one time, we did put the consultant in for more time. And what I can say to you is that it is a hard position in the sense that shifting the way you look as a teacher or as an educator, shifting the way you look at something that you have been trained in is hard. It's very hard to do that. And the work of our literacy consultant has helped us really look at each child individually. When we talk about the data walls, when we did that presentation a few weeks ago, when our administrators did that and talked about the data walls, all of our consultant has helped us get to that point where we are looking at each child and each skill of that child multiple times a year. And that's one of the biggest things that has happened for us. So we certainly have a plan that this is not an infinite amount of time. And the goal obviously is that as we go through the curriculum process, the curriculum review process, we will be looking at literacy. And I will say that literacy is being looked at the Department of Ed next year. We typically go through the curriculum cycle the year after the state goes through it, so that if the state makes specific recommendations, we can then look at those. However, we will be looking at literacy in conjunction with the state next year. So that is something. In the meantime, the goal is, and the plan is, that we keep the literacy consultant for one more year. I'm more than happy to have the consultant come in and talk to you so you can see the skill set, which is significant. And we can certainly do that if you wish to do that. But for one more year, as we're transitioning into the reconfiguration of grade levels and teams, there's a lot of work that needs to be done around data collection and how we're meeting students' needs. So that's the longer range plan. So next year, moving ahead in that direction with a curriculum review of literacy. So that's the answer to that question.
I have one comment on that.
Yes.
I have heard the same as Josh. And specifically, worrisome to teachers that, correct me if I'm wrong, but we'll be getting rid of the literacy coaches in the building and just having the consultant. Is that
So
true, or?
We have talked about this. We had one halftime literacy coach. We did cut that position for this year. It was a halftime position, and knowing the financial status and knowing that, like, right now, ideally the two math coaches work really well because we've got a math coach in, each math coach in the town. So we can into the towns. So that seems to be working well, but that did not happen overnight. That took time. So a similar trajectory would be, as we're looking at literacy and to the point of long-term planning and to the point of looking at our facilities, all of those things will be taken, as we're working through them. Jerry.
Okay, with all that said, reading scores were down this year. Was it 4 points? 4 points or 2 points?
I get 4, I think, on the NAEP.
Yeah, I was pretty sure it was 4.
What document are you looking at?
The testing scores that came out, I don't know about.
Okay, so what we will do is the NAEP has been referred to several times, and there's a lot of information about the NAEP. So we will go through what that testing does, and I'm going to actually have AJ speak a little bit to that right at this moment, maybe like 30 seconds to a minute. And he can speak to it at the higher levels because it has been referred to, and we will also bring it down to talk about at the elementary level.
Yeah, so really quick, I can just speak about our NAEP experience here at Noble High School. So we have only been chosen, in my perspective, so in my years here, for grade 8. So we have never had our older students tested as part of the NAEP. There's a process. And the tricky part is, and no test is perfect. But I think, again, just pulling from my experience, again, not necessarily good, bad, or indifferent, but we have seen a tremendous number of folks that opt their children out of that test. And so it's a very easy opt out. And again, I'm not comparing state to state because we're probably not dissimilar than other states. So I'm not trying to say like, oh, I'm just, like thinking about our district. And we don't get our district's results, for our students that end up taking it. It's more of a broadly based, how students do at the state level. But it's just not an assessment done in a way that we would ever assess students as a high school staff. So folks come in, it's really well-intentioned, well-meaning folks. They come into our building, they bring their rolling suitcases, if you will. They always prefer to be in the gymnasium to test, which is never a place that we test, locally. So it's and then the first thing, and there's no way around this, but they prefer that when students finish the assessment, they're able to leave immediately, which in my opinion, the worst thing you can do is tell a 13-year-old that they're allowed to leave as soon as they finish, because they will take about 35 seconds to finish whatever they're doing because they want to go back to whatever they could do instead. So that assessment, so the first thing they always say, and it's fine, but they're like, just want to let you know that your principal has said you need to stay here until the time is up, which is really great. Like, I appreciate that. You know, yes, that was me. I did say that, to try and give us the best possible. And again, I'm not in any way comparing, you know, I'm guessing that looks the same across all 50 states. It's a really protocol-rich, scripted experience. So I think that is the same, but I just think about for our experience, and I look at the number of folks that opt their student out, and that's fine. They're certainly welcome to do that. And then when that experience is just so hard. So again, that's our grade 8 experience, if that helps at all. It's not ideal, but again, I don't think it's ideal.
Those testing scores were for third grade.
But I will, the NAEP does not, when you were referring to the NAEP and we've gone down, it's not our district that has gone down. It is not delineated out by MSAD 60. It's the state of Maine.
And I just, the NAEP, the value of the NAEP, in my opinion, is that it's consistent. It's been given every 2 years for the last 20, 30 years. 60, thank you. So it's a consistent measure of how states are doing, not districts within the state. What we have here is a state that's not doing well. I don't think anybody's going to argue that 44th ranking is a good spot to be. Our NWEA Maine through assessments put us average with our state. That's where the problem comes in. And I want to just bring it up because if we are measured against a failing state on the NWEA, that would then suggest that perhaps we need to address our academics much more rigorously than we are, because we are average with the state of Maine, who is not doing well nationally. And what really bothers me, not so much that we're so low, but that New Hampshire is 5th. And I do not understand why our sister state across the river is 5th in the nation for the same test. And we can fix this. I know we can fix it. We don't need to fix the state. We just need to fix us. Thank you.
I had a question about the payment for that consultant position. Wasn't it part of a grant?
It was last year. It is in some grants this year. It is in professional development this year as well.
Okay, and can that grant, so that grant can be used for any professional development?
That grant
Or
was
specific?
specific to literacy.
Oh,
Yeah.
Okay. And then as far as bringing up literacy scores, I do still want to double back on the idea of analyzing teacher engagement with classrooms. I think that the only thing that's going to bring up scores of these tests and literacy in general is engaging teachers. And that's not fun teachers, it's engaging teachers. And I think our teachers know the difference between those two things. But I think we need to start finding those teachers that are engaging. I talk to students all the time because my son is in high school, my daughter's in 3rd grade. And they have their teachers where they're like, I learned 5 times more in this teacher's class than the next class because they engage me constantly. And we need to find those teachers and have them teach the rest of, teach the rest of the grade. How they're getting these kids involved. And it's not just about being fun. There is a formula for engagement that some teachers are mastering. And we need to find those teachers and reward them.
Are you able to, and it doesn't have to be tonight, give the breakdown of what that consultant is, like what we're seeing in the budget for the consultant and what that looks like? Thank you.
I would also say that next week we can share the NWEA information that we've presented before, but we can show that again because we are doing, to your, just to show that we are doing well. We've made some strides. And again, I can certainly have the consultant come in if you want to spend some time speaking with her to know the depth of knowledge that she brings forward, which is significant.
This is also a random side note, but it's a couple meetings, and I think we've talked about it before, but I do want to also just remind us to be really careful when sharing numbers that are not specifically in front of us, because we can all do a lot of Googling and come up with a lot of different numbers. So knowing people are trusting what we're saying, and I can share different numbers and doing research. I want just a gentle board reminder to we need to make sure if we're sharing numbers that these are numbers that we've all agreed on and all vetted and that we're looking at the same things.
Thank you for saying that, Laura. And I was going to bring that up after the numbers that were quoted in the last meeting. I think if you're going to quote numbers, you got to tell what your source is so people can understand that that's just one source. It doesn't necessarily reflect the entire reality.
I think, gosh, as a math teacher, any number can tell a story. You can pick and choose it. You can say the source and 1,000 different ways, right? So yeah, sharing source is fine. Yeah, when we share the NWA data, I just ask that we also share the state average when we talk about our district's NWA, make sure that we see the state average as well. And from what I can tell, those numbers are the same, or they're off by 1 point. So be that as it may. The other thing is when it comes to the consultant, would you please bring the consultant with the results and the duration that she's worked? Like what were the academic results before she started working with that building, and what were the academics following that? Just spending money, we should know the impact of that work, right? So thank you.
Anything else? Question wise, before we move into additional cuts?
One other question, wholly different subject. Denise, there was a meeting where we talked about, God forbid, the money doesn't come from federal government. And I believe you said something along, I'm pretty sure we can get through the year if it doesn't come, right? It was something along those lines. And so I'm just curious, if I think we get something like $2.5 to $3 million from the federal government for the different services that the district provides. And if that money doesn't come, where is the $2.5 to $3 million? Where is that going to come from to cover those services? Where is it in our budget that could be used?
So I'm not exactly sure. You're talking about our federal grants.
The federal money. So because of the between our governor and federal government, they don't have agreement, and right,
So
we know that's going on.
There's lots of presidential declarations about funding for grants. The grants we currently have are law, and they would have to go through Congress and the Senate in order to be cut. So people were very concerned that we have these, for example, our local entitlement special education federal grant, somewhere in the neighborhood of $900,000.
I don't think I'm talking about grants as much as I'm talking about, we have a certain amount of money that comes from federal government, Title I, Title V.
So federal grants.
Well, those are grants.
Those are
Those are also, all the money that comes from federal government is our grants.
Right, so you have local entitlement, which is special education. Then you have Titles 1, 2, and 5, which are part of ESEA. Every student, then I think we have a couple other state grants. But those federal grants are all part of law. It's not just, when people think of grants, they think you write an application and they choose somebody. This is all decided on a formulaic basis. So again, I think what I was saying, as I was trying to say, is that I think even if there was some declaration, as in the recent months, that the president was going to cut off the federal funding, disband the Department of Ed, all of these things, people are worried on a day-to-day basis. Well, I'm paid with those funds. What would happen? I think because it's part of law, the process to get us there is not imminent. It's not going to happen in the next 3 months or 6 months. So at least for now, the Maine Department of Ed is telling us that we are good, and we're certainly good for this year.
So you're not expecting this to impact our 25-26 budget?
Correct.
I did have a question. I know in New Hampshire, a lot of school boards are writing to their state to reevaluate the EPS per student. Well, the EPS, that is per student. So I was hoping that we could get that started with our board. I think that we need to have that reevaluated by the state. It's too low right now, and you've said literally no school runs on that number right now. So I would love to see us get together and send a letter.
I just want to say the state has been over the last year or so undergoing an analysis and a revamp of what a new funding formula might look like. There are many constituents, there are many different levels of both government and communities. I know that there is a business manager from our state business manager group that is on the committee, and they have routine requests for comments and things like that. So I know that that is already in process there. And I want to say, I think there's something due from that committee sometime this spring. So we'll definitely keep an eye on that.
Yeah, I mean, regardless, I think I would like to send like what our evaluation per student is. And if those two numbers are not matching up, we need to send the number we need. And I would love to get the board together to do that. The second thing I had is still on K through 3 technology. I really think we should move to computer carts that maybe these kids are getting once a week. I don't think we need correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we need a tablet for every, I don't know if we have a tablet for every child right now, K through 3, but I don't think we need it. I think a lot of the programs that are being used could be done student to teacher, or maybe with one interactive board for the room.
Bridget, do you want to speak a little bit about this? Thank you.
So, well, a couple of things. We are 1-to-1, K to 12. It's actually a very minimal cost to our district with a huge advantage to teaching and learning. What having the devices K to 12 does is allow teachers to individualize education and provide way more resources that are available in print. So a teacher can differentiate by providing different reading materials, providing different worksheets or activities for students to do. And they can print and provide those. There's a cost to that too. Or they can the kids are very, sorry, I don't like standing from there to there. Or the kids can independently grab their own iPad, scroll through a library of books selected by the teacher at their grade level to access, or interact with a variety of activities to differentiate. It's right where they are. It's practice specified for their skill set and help them grow at a pace that's comfortable for them. I spent a lot of time in a few different classrooms in our district, have an adopted tech directed program, and I watched them use their technology in a variety of ways. And what having individual iPads does is reduce the strain on the teacher. I've operated in both a multi-pack model and a 1-to-1 model. And when you have a pack, there's so much time spent helping the kid sign in, signing out the other kid, problem solving. You take away all of that when you have a 1-to-1 device. So to me, the cost per benefit is tremendous, especially in time saving and teacher attention. In the situations, especially K to 3, when students are using iPads, teachers are working with students in small groups or individually, and that is precious time. So when a student can independently grab an iPad, have differentiated work at their fingertips that they really need very little help and support with, I think that's really meaningful interaction. And at K to 3, we're talking about 15, maximum 30 minutes for reading and writing, reading and math. That's where I see it happening the most. And that's where the differentiation is the most valuable. So I can't say enough how much I think that the value is for what we provide. And our teachers are so good and so mindful about providing meaningful technology experiences and using our software well. And I don't know if you saw our cuts. We cut $1,000 or $100,000 worth of software because we're really mindfully looking at what we're using, what we're implementing. And we don't want kids playing games on their computers at school. The screen time data that I have that I'm happy to share with you is that over the age of 5, it's really about quality and not quantity. And the quality is around creation and educational gains. So those interactive pieces where you can read a book and answer some questions without sitting next to your teacher. You can continue and extend that learning one-on-one. I mean, that's what I think technology offers our K to 3 students. And I share concerns. I was really, really conservative with my children in technology. And I think it gets a little bit inflated about what we do in school because we have 1-to-1. I think it's really carefully executed and really thoughtfully executed. Hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I've spoken to my kids' doctors, et cetera. They really drill in that the screen time limit should be 2 hours, regardless of content. It just has to do with, the way your mind is seeing things. The stimulation that you're getting is different on a screen than when you're handling a paper book. I think when we're talking about saving money, unless we're seeing direct increases to test scores from those pieces of technology, which I don't think we've seen since COVID when they were implemented, I just can't justify it. And with the way I'm hearing parents talk about their comfort level, they're having a lot of their kids coming home saying, we watched YouTube on our iPads today. They're having a lot of kids coming home saying, we played games for the last 10 minutes, or we did Duolingo in our language class. And those don't seem like appropriate uses to me. I feel like that's something a teacher should be teaching to the student. That's why we send them there. So especially for K through 3, where I keep hearing from parents the same thing. I don't want my kid looking at a screen. I don't want my kid looking at a screen. I'm just trying to be a voice for those parents. So
If I could just follow up on your recommendation for your pediatrician, and not being a pediatrician, I can't say, but the sources I looked at are the American Pediatric Association, Center for Disease Control, the World Health Organization, the American Psychiatry Association, and I really scoured them because I want to give in good faith information about screen time. And across the board, they say there is no limit they do not recommend a specific hourly limit above 5. I can't find that anywhere except for like blogs and other anecdotal information. So it's out there and you can find it, but looking at those specific resources, that's not to say like, let's give free rein to our children on technology. No one says that either. They say, let's have our children creating, let's use it for differentiation, let's have them interacting, not viewing. And I'll address that in just a second. And they recommend family plans so that kids are getting enough sleep, that kids are not using screens at meals, so that kids are getting physical activity. And around that, you can kind of have some flexibility with how you use technology in your family's lives. And we implement those same principles at school. Whole child, we don't have screens at lunch. We have activity time for our students. And I wanted to speak to YouTube because YouTube is blocked in our school across the board. We have access to YouTube.
sorry, on a lot of devices, it's not.
YouTube into there are some ways that students can get around it, but that's misbehavior from a student. There are times when teachers use YouTube instructionally. Lots of times when teachers use YouTube instructionally, and you can embed that into Google Classroom. And I have some teachers here that can speak to that. So we use very controlled use of video tools in our classroom. And whether or not teachers use games, Chromebooks and games as a reward, that's not our general practice. And that does not happen in my observation in the elementary school classrooms, particularly K to 3.
Well, I would just really like to see the data. If you have screen time usage data that you get from the iPads, that would be really awesome. So that we could see exactly, like for this past year, how the average time that we're spending on a screen in the classroom. And again, just seeing like we're always talking about our return on investment. So Chromebooks are known to be one of the most expensive things out there to maintain. Yeah, so that's just what I'm
I have
thinking.
some additional information. I think that actually I've shared with the board, but that's regardless. Chromebooks are one of the most cost-effective ways to educate students. There are other districts in our state that use MacBooks for students, and the cost is 3 times the cost of a Chromebook.
Okay.
Thank you.
And after 4th grade, when we start testing and start doing all that, I totally understand the use. I feel like it's totally appropriate after 4th grade. I just am having a hard time seeing a little kid that's 6 years old, 7 years old, looking at a screen in a classroom with a highly educated teacher. It's just
Who cannot be attending to every kid at a time. And I'm sorry, I feel like I'm starting to get argumentative, which is not my own, but I just feel strongly about it, as do you. So anyway, thank you for caring about our kids and technology, and I'd rather it be a partnership than a contention. So please forgive my excitement.
not.
No, and I'll add, I don't know that I have, as a parent with kids in this district, I don't know that I have or little kids in the district, I don't know that I have a strong opinion one way or the other, but I will say, especially last year, we were really good at it. We're not doing a great job this year, but every day, as soon as they got in the car, because they tell me nothing, we would do 2 truths and a lie. And almost every single day, both of them one of their true SOAR was where they were at in Prodigy or what they had earned in Prodigy, which is one of the learning applications. So like, it was like a fun competition thing. And like, so there definitely is learning going on. I want people to, I mean, I know you know that, but like, I also don't want that to be part of the message that is going out is like, when I hear them talk about how they use it, they're sharing what they learned or like where they got to, or did you know about this trick you could do to like get through this part faster, or like, so you can unlock this other special place of education in the app or whatnot. So just wanted to add that too.
Denise, if we eliminated K through 3 one-on-one laptops, what would the cost saving be? Do you have an approximate number?
I do not. I do know that the technology plan that we have in the district, 6 years, Bridget, is it 6 years or 5? The cycle is 5 years. So what happens is in certain grades, we get new devices and the older devices get passed on down to the lower grades. So we would have to work together to try to figure out if, what that might be, but I'm not sure.
Like a percent of our budget. Like we see that number. We can get you accurate numbers.
Yes.
So sorry about that.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Audra, would it make any sense to just do a quick survey of the K-3 teachers to see what maybe they are using them for, just to set the parents' minds at rest? I mean, if we get all of the teachers, we'll probably get some pretty good data on it, and the number, I mean, we really do. So I was talking to somebody about technology the other day, and I think we don't want these kids to get behind in technology. You know, I need them to come over and help me. But I think that, I agree. I mean, we want to limit the time. There was a study out there that if they're playing games on them, it can create a brainwave that mimics ADHD. We certainly don't want to create ADHD kids in our classrooms because they're on the screen. But I don't think that's the case in the school. I think that in the school, they're using them for supplemental teaching, and we just want to know what that is and how much time it's being done. I think that's what you're asking for, isn't it?
It is like a lot of, actually, I'm not just like coming up with this out of nowhere. This is something that a lot of districts are looking at because the grant money is done for the computers from COVID. So a lot of schools are looking at reevaluating K through 3 with technology just because of the expense. So when we're talking about
So we're not doing, we were one-to-one well before COVID. So for us, it wasn't a new COVID expense. We've had our plan since well before, and it's been continuous throughout.
Thanks, Bridget. I was going to say that too. When I was on the board before, we were doing one-on-one.
We don't, yeah, I think that's a great point and a great request, Nancy, to do that. And I'd actually tossed these in my bags the other week when this came up, but like, just also just like examples of things, like my 4th grader made like this whole pamphlet about the Grand Canyon using his device. My 3rd grader made a great little collage booklet, but like they are doing and like learning like true executive function with this, like with their devices also. Anyone wants to look.
I turned this on for a reason. I forgot about it. Stop it.
Okay, are we ready to move into additional cuts?
Quick bathroom break. Take a quick bathroom break.
Yes. So a 5-minute break. We've had a request for a 5-minute break.
Okay, and before we go, we are at an hour and 26 minutes.
Okay, so again, as I mentioned that last week, we talked a little bit about the fact that we are continuously every single day going through the budget and looking line by line, item by item at different, different parts and pieces. And we've spent so many hours on this budget. And these are the additional cuts from last week to this week that we have vetted. And we'll just we'll go through those right now. So again, some of this is not specific with names because we're still working through all of that. So if it's general, that's why. So an additional 83,000 under the teacher's contract, 39,000 to the teacher's contract, which would be moved to the local entitlement grant. an additional 45,000 out of the support staff contract, an additional 11,350 under stipends, and then 36,255 under supplies, books, and equipment. So that would bring, as you can see, that's an additional $214,000. So that would put the budget at about $50 million, right there. And that would be a 1.96 increase to expenses, which is tremendous. That is a tremendous feat. And a 7.98% increase to the school budget. And Denise, do we want to talk a little bit right now about what that would do for?
Lauren's favorite question.
Yes.
So based on the new budget number, 50,292,192, using the valuations that we are given, by the state, in our ED 279, I see that, again, I'll preface this. This is what, the rate would be per 100,000 to taxpayers. But this is not the rate you will see when you get your tax bill. They do not, they're not, it's not a one-to-one correlation because the towns have their other expenses that go as part of your tax rate. It is also not the valuation, I believe, that is assessed by your towns on your house. This is a valuation that the state does for the school district. And again, it is not one-to-one with what the town managers see as they calculate your taxes. So that's a big disclaimer, all to say, with this new budget number, estimated per 100,000 to Berwick residents would be $82.29. Lebanon taxpayers, $81.81. And North Berwick taxpayers, $50.81. Anyone?
And this is per thousand.
Per 100,000. Yeah. Do we want to read them again, or do you have those?
Yeah, I got it.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. I guess this is the time when we ask for your feedback and further conversation about that percent of 7.98, talking through that a little bit, talking through, again, with the disclaimers that Denise gave about the what the rate is per 100,000, all those disclaimers about that. It's not the full thing. Everybody will see it doesn't translate exactly to that. But this is just the time to weigh in because, again, our goal next week is to present an updated version of the budget so that we can go through that. So this would be the time for these discussions.
And you give us, I know you can't give us names and so forth, but a little bit of guidance on where the cuts are coming from, a little more than just supports. I'd kind of like to know a little more specifics on those.
So I can say in general terms that the cuts are coming from the support staff contract. So that would be an ed tech. The bands are ed tech, school nutrition, secretary.
Audra, where does this budget leave us in terms of the conversation about assistant principals?
This has the assistant principals in the budget at the rate with which we've discussed. So half-time in Lebanon, 0.6 at Knowlton, 0.2 in North Berwick, 0.8 at Hussey.
What is the reality of doing that? How do you find a 0.2 assistant principal?
That would be The assistant principal at Huzzy would go for 1 day to North Berwick.
Sandra? Can I ask Denise a question?
Yes, please.
I understand, I'm gonna take Lebanon, my town, so it's 8181 per thousand, per 100,000, right? I know that. So a $400,000 home would be 4 times the 8181, and that would be on top of the town's budget. Did I get that straight?
So this amount would, there's a calculation that's in the budget book each year. It's called the District Formula for Local Share. And what it does is it takes our formula for assigning costs to each town. Half of it relates to the state valuation of the towns, and half of it relates to the student counts.
And then,
And we get a percentage, so each town is assessed a certain percentage of the total $50 million budget. In addition, there's the school costs, if any, school nutrition, adult education, and what we do is we take those things and come up with a formula for that. So yes, that formula decides how it goes there, and then roughly based on valuation, that's what it is. That's why it's not exact. It's not something that we can tie to the penny when we send it to the towns.
But Nancy's question is correct. This adds to whatever the town has for an increase. I mean,
Yes.
maybe they don't have
Yes.
an increase. I know North.
Because the towns assess for the schools.
I got it.
Yep.
That kind of handy.
Do we have, because I don't remember, and I don't want to spend my time looking if we don't have it. Do we have numbers last year at the elementary schools versus this year at the elementary schools? Did we talk about just to see like looking at like Huzzy dropping down 0.8, like they're 401 this year, like what were they, or 3, if you don't know updated information, what were they, that's not, yeah, 388. How many students were there last year? And same with North Berwick to make that decision to go from a 0.5 there down to a 0.2. How does the 231 this year compare to, or next year compare to what's there this year?
I'm gonna try to find that.
Okay, if you can, I'm just curious because I do think that that is helpful in this conversation, because if the numbers haven't changed a whole lot, I know that there's definitely some change. But I will restate, especially adding pre-K and now 2 brand new grades of students to the 3 elementary schools, and to be reducing administrators and staff seems like a precarious situation that I'm not especially fond of.
Me too, Lauren. I agree with you. I hate to say it, Audra, but I'd love to see the numbers both ways next week when we're trying to make decisions. I don't think it's going to be enough money to sway me to think we should be cutting these people. And I think we're going to get to the point where it's going to be hard to find anybody with that degree of education and qualification to want to do the job like that.
Mm-hmm.
Peg, are you proposing that we leave a 50% assistant principal in each of the elementary schools?
Yeah, I'd hate to cut any more than that. I still don't know how we find people to do that. But
Right.
Knowlton assistant principal now is 0.6. Okay, so that's remaining. Huzzy is losing 0.2. North Berwick's losing 0.3. And Lebanon is losing half also. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Like, I can give you the current totals, and then you can compare that to the document that we handed out earlier. So currently, Huzzy is 368. North Berwick is 251. Hanson is 268. Lebanon Elementary is 135. And Knowlton's 201.
I'm sorry, can you say it again, please? I totally messed.
All of them?
Yes,
Okay.
I'm sorry, I messed mine up.
Huzzy is 368.
Mhm.
North Berwick is 251. Hanson is 268. Lebanon Elementary is 135. Knowlton is 201.
So Audra, am I reading this right? Like Hussey is actually going up, but we're cutting the.
Correct.
That makes no sense to me, but.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like for 20 kids, one way or the other in schools, I don't feel like that justifies really adjusting those numbers. That's my personal opinion. So yeah, I think I would be curious what putting, I guess, leaving, well, even Hanson is 268 down to 262 and we're cutting a half.
The premise for that is because it's one building, not two.
Okay. I'm curious to see what adding some things back in look like for next week and how it affects the whole picture. If that's possible.
I'm going to ask you to be super specific because otherwise I don't know how to get you the numbers you need.
Okay, is it possible, just to cover our bases, we can like look at all the options to see what the cost is to add, to put Hussey back to a full, North Berwick back to a half, and then to see Lebanon with a whole versus a half?
Yeah, I don't think for me, the two building thing doesn't really fly. It wasn't like they were miles apart. It was,
At 400 kids.
that's a different reason. I mean, if you're looking at numbers, I'm looking at numbers. I guess I would say, could we see the numbers with no change to what it is currently at buildings?
Anything else, Lauren, around that?
Thank you.
Anything, any other topics or discussions about the percent?
You know what percent of our budget is personnel versus non-personnel?
There should be a summary in your packet and it doesn't reflect the changes we just handed out. Let me pull that up. As of the documents in your binders, it's approximately 83% salaries and benefits. Doesn't change because these, right, and so it would be this.
Sandra? Okay. All right, with the budget of, with the personnel budget, of 83%, leaving 17% for all of the other costs of the district. Again, it's just a comment. We have a lot of staff. We have a lot of staff that has a comparatively good incomes to other areas. And my concern is we have a school that we're shutting down because of it needs too much work. We have buildings that are in danger of having leaking roofs. Do we have 17% of the budget left over? It doesn't leave us a lot of money for maintenance on the other facilities. We have seven buildings we have to take care of. If I'm not mistaken, 7 different buildings of different ages of repair. And again, everybody wants, we want the best for these kids, and we know that sometimes it means more teachers or more administrators or whatever. But at what point does that balance have to be addressed where we've got to back off from personnel and add it into the other sides of the budget? Facility maintenance is huge. You let this roof start to leak, and it's going to be an even bigger problem than just getting up there and putting a tarp up. But you know what I'm saying? I don't want to have a blue community. So it's something we need to be very, very cautious of. Yes, we want the best for these kids. Nobody wants that more than I fight for kids all the time. Sometimes it's a balancing act. We all know that, but 17% doesn't leave us a whole lot of money for some of the other costs of this district, and it's a big district. I think last year I heard concerns about the tar, the hot top or something. Well, when that goes, it's going to cost a whole lot more than fixing it when it's starting to go. Just common sense maintenance. People who I implore us to be very cautious about providing for wants and not looking at those needs, because those needs are going to come back and hit us hard. Just saying.
And I think that definitely goes to the facility study and breaking that down and then coming up with that plan.
Right.
Denise has talked a couple of times about just really building a really good system where we do keep money allotted every single budget cycle in for those types of things. Yeah.
And I do think, we truly have the best people in Noble, and we can have the best facilities and we can have the best programs. But if we don't have the best people, those are useless. And we do have the best people. And one of them is Kevin Moore, who has gone through and he presented to us in front of everyone that he is really watching things and working on things. And I said it last year and I will say it again this year. If we choose parking lots over people, I will be severely disappointed.
I do think the idea of, once we wrap up this budget season, starting immediately on a 5 to 10 year plan, where we're discussing more in depth, reserves for maintenance. We need to know what the next Lebanon school is going to be and when that's going to happen. And, I would like to see a 5 to 10 year plan as well, immediately following this budget season.
That was the goal with the facility study. So.
Can we jump back to assistant principals? Approximately 150,000 to add back those 2 half-time assistant principals.
And what would that do to the percentage increase, Denise?
That brings the increase to, school expenses, 2.26. And the increase for the total school budget to 8.59.
Thank you.
Yes. Do you want
I'm
to?
seeing a nod. Yes.
Okay. So they've asked me to give you that cost per $100,000. That brings it Berwick 88.38. Lebanon 87.52. And North Berwick 55.24.
$150,000 increase to the budget.
So,
Yeah, so like $6 more per thousand, 100,000.
6 times 4 is 24.
$6 more per 100,000, like right around there. Yeah,
Average house be another $25, 25.
$5 a year, yeah.
So let's add up. 88,
88 what?
I don't know, 88 something.
38.
88, 38. Okay, thanks.
Read them again.
I got them.
Okay.
It was just that one I missed. I missed the cents on Berwick. 55.24.
Would we feel better as a board if, I know Josh, you said you don't love that like the job description is the same for the assistant principal as the principal?
Just.
It's just of note. Well, would we feel better as a board if we discussed the role being more specifically having to do with bullying of the students?
No, because the administrator, you have to be flexible. You have to, when the principal is at a meeting or whatnot, the assistant principal is assuming the same duties, right? So they work together, right? It's just one has to be the point person, right, for the building. And the assistant does all the same things, right? So they essentially have the same roles and they work together. I mean, principals and assistant principals do work very well together, and largely they do very much the same roles. So I wouldn't want to split those up at all. No, I don't think that would be a good thing for functioning of a building.
After the budget season, after this budget is done, could we get the data from PBIS on bullying at the elementary schools? I'd like to either put it to rest or address it, because I just don't know that it is as serious as social media is telling us. And I'm not talking middle school, I'm not talking high school, I'm talking elementary school. They have the PBIS. It's just, tell me it's just a button click.
I'm gonna ask one of the elementary principals just to speak in general terms right now on that. Rock, paper, scissors.
No, everyone just looked at me.
So we don't need hard, fast numbers, you know, but just,
No,
we do eventually, but I don't want to put you on the spot right now.
I can quickly look up data. And give you an overview of what the behaviors that we are seeing are. Because I can tell you that launching a bullying investigation is very rare. A kid saying a mean thing to another kid is not rare. They say unexpected things.
I think that speaks to what a parent might perceive as bullying or what a child does and the actual definition. And I don't think it's ever going to go away, Nancy. I mean, as long as I've been on this board, bullying has been an issue. And I think culturally, bullying is an issue in this country, and it's what kids are seeing every day. So I don't think it's going to get better. If anything, we're going to see it get worse because kids are just seeing it modeled everywhere.
I would just speak to that very briefly and make sure our teachers are not modeling bullying. And I know they're not, but I would make double sure.
Teachers are not. I'm talking about at home, what kids are seeing at home, on the news, everywhere. You can't escape it right now.
So like an overview of this year. Disruption accounts for 15% of our referrals. So let me back up. We use two categories, so a major versus a minor. Right now I have them both up. So if I combine those, disruption would be like 27%. There isn't like massive bullying investigations happening. I think I've had one instance this year that have had to do some work on. Most of the time, you don't have that repeated ongoing thing that in a K-5 school, there's not the power differential, there's not the repeated piece. So, when I look at my behavior data that I have right now, we have, disruption is a big one, followed by some disrespect, defiance. Those are the kind of more frequent things that are happening K-5.
Just wanted to ask you a quick question, or maybe just this, we were at your school a couple of weeks ago. And it was, I still say, I've never been in such a calm school in my life. But you must, if you had data from before and now, then, and I don't want you to look it up, I don't want, we don't want to take the time, but I'm just saying,
Actually, we're really proud of it at Knowlton because.
Okay, go ahead and tell us.
I'm looking over at Mr. Boyce because we've just been like, our school was featured in PBIS blurb because our data has improved so much. Do you remember any specific numbers from that? Yeah. Print off the flyer for you, send it your way. But if you can look at like this is just a quick snapshot from last year to this year. The green is going to be last year. The blue is going to be this year. These are the categories. So notice all of them have gone down for every single category that we track as far as behavior. We can also show you that average referrals has gone down in every single category, every month.
Can I guess that we also have that for the other schools too?
The other elementary schools?
Yeah. Just, as I said, we hear a lot of bullying.
It's going down.
Yeah.
Right?
This is last year versus this year
Yeah.
in my school.
Nice job.
I think this would be like a really good opportunity for our goal with community engagement is to maybe make some type of like a campaign talking about the reduction in bullying for this year. So that we're really like putting that at the forefront of what the public is seeing when they go on our website, when they are talking to our teachers. I want to all be on the same page, all know those numbers off the top of our heads.
I think what we're presented is a reduction in infractions, right? So bullying is a type of infraction, right? And kids say mean things, adults say mean things, right? So, but saying mean things isn't necessarily bullying, right? By definition of what it has to be in our code of conduct per state, right? And per our positive behavior intervention systems. So, but largely, if we're seeing infractions go down, like that's a good thing, right? We should celebrate that. There's always going to be students who come home and say, I speak to my daughters and, not every day is a great day, right? I mean, that's just true. That's just life. That's just part of being in a community and being in a classroom with 20 other kids, right? So I think it's important just as a community, as a board, as a community, as everybody, like, it doesn't say that bad things don't happen, but by and large, the data does not support that it's a significant problem. That's what that's what we're just shown, right? And we can share that. So I would, it's in fractions. And I think that's important that we just call it what it is.
I would say that may be true, Josh, but a lot of bullying happens when people aren't looking. And I have spoken to teachers who have said that that's what makes this so difficult, that kids who do it are smart, and it makes it really hard in situations to address. I'm not saying it's prevalent, but I'm also pretty sure that it is happening in places. And we have put supports in place recognizing that, particularly at the middle school. So I think it's important to keep tabs on what that's doing. But Allie, I 100% agree with you that we need to talk more about what we're doing and how seriously we've taken it, because the impression is what's out there. And if we're not putting anything out there, then what is out there becomes people's reality. And that's going to be a problem when it comes to voting if we haven't put our side of the story and what we're trying to do out there for people to see.
Could this be something that our communications director heads out?
Just one other budget related question. I need to come back to the board with this idea of the percentages. It's just something I've been toying with and read about. So I'm not ready to share a source, right? I think that's one of the things that we're looking for. One of the things I'm curious about and concerned about, I'm concerned about what we anticipate as likely impacts to our budget during the 26-27 school year. As we consider this one, I think it's important to look a little bit further ahead. And just general ballpark, we know that if we continue with pre-K, we're going to do that. That's about $1 million, give or take. We know enrollment is projected to go down, and that's going to be a decrease, so $500,000, give or take, from the state. And then we know the increase of contractual obligations is approximately another $1.5 million or so. So that's a $3 million increase just next year. In this one, we're looking at it's like a 1.2, something like that, somewhere in there. I don't quote me on that number, but it's like an increase of a little over $1 million. And as we sit right here, we're looking at a $3 million increase next year. So I think that's important to know. And then the other thing is just knowing about infrastructure and that we need to address those things. I would lightly say we might be able to address those things if we were at an 80-20 type ratio. But again, I'll bring some of that back, or if the board is interested in having that conversation, I will share it. But I'm just going to do my own research on it because I do want to look at it. So that's what I'm thinking right now.
So we're 36 minutes over our 90-minute goal. Do we have any other questions at this point or discussion topics to present?
I guess my only input to the board at this point is, the more information and numbers we can have tonight, we will meet the necessary goal of approving a budget next Thursday. If you want to talk about bottom line budget, if you want to talk about adding the APs back, the more you can be definitive with me, the easier it will be for me to generate those documents. Otherwise, if we come here next Thursday and it's just questions, we're never going to be able to approve the budget. So I don't know if that means just making sure I have a good list of things to calculate, or if you want to do a straw poll, if you want to talk percentages, like, I don't know what the next step for you guys is to coming to being good with the budget.
Just a question. We have not officially voted on the restructuring of the schools.
Yeah, correct. We can, correct.
So if we we have to approve this budget next week. Hopefully we will approve it. If the restructuring decides to take a different kind of task, you know, when we actually have a chance to really maybe talk about it a little bit more, which maybe we're not going to, but maybe we are, I don't know. But won't impact, I mean, it doesn't matter. The budget's going to be the budget, and we just work within it if we made some tweaks to the restructuring of the schools. Would that be correct? Correct assumption?
I think I understand the question, but if I'm not going the way you want me to, just clarify for me. When you approve the budget next week, that restructuring piece is in there. So if you approve that budget, that piece is in there. Does that answer your question?
So we don't need to vote on the restructuring as already a given.
It's going to be as part of the budget.
Okay.
Do you want to?
Unless the board decides it's not the route they want to go.
If
And
we
can I
don't,
just,
the budget goes up, correct? If we pull that out.
Correct.
can I just throw something out at you then? I thought about it in the car the other day, I think yesterday. Is there any chance that fourth grade can stay? We're gonna keep the school open. Can we keep the fourth grade in Lebanon, bring the fifth grade over, and maybe because we're not putting fourth grade, add the fourth grade to the middle school and close, you know, use the Knowlton School for your office and some of the other, just a thought, because I really truly hate to see those fourth graders trucking across town. It just kills me.
I mean, we can price that out. We can certainly look at the price.
It's not, and I don't even want to take a lot of time. It's just, if there's any way to keep those fourth graders in Lebanon with a building that's already being used.
So the issue is this, it does take a lot of time, if I'm being frank.
I know, but-
It's not a simple, the restructuring isn't a simple, we're moving someone from this building to that building. There's a lot of consideration in how that
You
happens.
give it a little bit of consideration. Not just a little, don't go overboard.
I don't know what you mean. I don't really know how to calculate what you.
I just want to, is there any chance at all that they can stay there without it destroying the budget?
So if they do, these are the things that we would consider, we need to consider, right?
Okay, great.
Classroom teachers,
Yep.
cafeteria staff, a custodian, special education services, a special education teacher, a counselor.
But Bill, aren't they all just moving over here?
It varies with the reconfiguration.
See, that's the piece we haven't got, so that's why.
And the unfortunate thing about that is because we can't necessarily
Right.
talk
Yep.
specifics because of staffing. However, what I will say is, this happened last year. When we did do some RIFs, the board does need to act, and you will know names and you will know positions at that point in time. We're just this week talking with staff.
All right. The other important thing to know is currently, with the current enrollment projections, there is not room at the Noble Middle School building to have all the fourth grade in. There's not enough.
I knew there wasn't room for all of them, but I knew that, I didn't know, but maybe two classes could go.
There's four potential rooms. And how many fourth grade class sections do we have?
I don't remember. And then 12 is in the new.
When the Harriman did their study, they had two columns there, and one included flex spaces. And I know they talked about flex spaces. I was hoping the study actually defined flex space. And I know it's not gonna impact our decision here, unfortunately. I would have loved to have that conversation if we had the time to have it. Because when it was flex space, there's more than enough room. There's like an extra 100 students, just by numbers, right? When they gave their number for students using flex space, but does flex space mean we turn the gymnasium into classrooms? I was like, well, that wouldn't work, obviously. But what's the definition of flex space?
So I did,
Oh.
thank you. I did email, Jamie, who presented information, just to give us a little more information on flex spaces. So he used Knowlton as an example. So on the reverse of it, after you look through the email response, Knowlton is on the back. For those in the audience, flex spaces as defined by the study were any spaces that were about 600 square feet, give or take a little bit, and could potentially be used for classrooms. However, they are spaces that may be special education rooms, speech and language rooms, the art room. To your point about the gym, not necessarily the gym, but like the art room. So that's what they're looking at as flex spaces, non-classroom used space right now, but are being utilized to service students.
So they don't consider the art room as a classroom?
They didn't on some of them, no. If it's just a classroom, like there are some spaces that are built as an art room,
Right.
so they did not count that necessarily.
Okay, all right. So the existing art room is actually not counted as flex space. But if a classroom was being used as an art room, then they would count that as a flex space. Okay, so the music room, the gymnasium, the art room are typical specials are not included when we consider flex space. Flex space really is all instructional areas. Even though we might have special ed happen in there because that is instruction, right? And have other therapies. Okay, that's all right. So I guess to me that the Harriman study, flex space, it is possible to put 3 grade levels there. Yes, it causes other constraints, such as providing those other services.
Right, you need to have our special education programs would need to remain in the schools because students need access to peers.
Mhm.
So that's what not the conundrum, but that's where it tightens up significantly is because we've got a lot of programs in a lot of, like Huzzy School has a lot of programs, middle school has a lot of programs right now. So that's
I just don't love 4th grade being alone in the building. It's just a lot of transition. It would be my preference to put 4th, 5th, and 6th all together in the middle school. We don't have the time to really flush that out and figure out how to do that. We're kind of this is the spot that we're in.
And that's not to say that the administrative group didn't look at that. It's just that not the way.
I wish that's our role.
And I think long-term, like if we do start that, because I don't think this is the end game, right? Because North Berwick is 75 years old and Mary Hurd is 65 years old. And so the Harriman study, I think the way it came out was just, it really bound us by time, unfortunately. But I think at the end of the season, when we start talking about the 5 to 10 year plan, maybe we can move toward more of a regional middle, something like that.
Yeah, maybe, and we're late in the night, so I don't want to keep going this, but we have multiple state and federal buildings that are hundreds of years old. So I don't buy the 75-year-old, we need to create another one. Like, let's take care of and invest in the ones that we have. That's a heck of a lot more affordable than building new ones.
just circling back to that, Nancy, you want a little bit of research on the 4th
It's
grade.
too late. I realize it really is too late, so we'll let it go.
Ship sail.
I tried. That's all I could do.
So that concludes our questions or discussion. Before I entertain a motion to adjourn, I want to thank the administration and all the teachers who have been in attendance tonight and at all the meetings for the budget, as well as the community who has been here and asking smart questions and showing that they're very involved and interested. So thank you very much.
Hey, man, I just was watching Denise's body language and I feel that, I know, this is our role, right? Is you're asking for clarity from the board tonight, now, about what we should be considering Thursday next week. And by your body language says that you didn't get the clarity you're asking for.
I would just say, I don't know if this 7.98% is a budget that you will vote for.
Denise,
Or did-
from my perspective,
Sorry, or did you want to add back the APs? Or did you, like, at this point, we need to be a little specific. And it's a very tough time for a board, right? Trying to come together and agree on the product that you're going to put out. But the more you can give me tonight, the more success we'll have next week, perhaps.
Denise, I'll answer from my perspective. I'm very grateful to the district for reducing expenses the way they have. Those increases are largely contractual. I'm fine, but I would like to have comparison for leaving the APs the way they are. That's my only, at this point, that's my only question.
So you want to, so I gave you those numbers, which would increase the budget for that 150,000.
That's all I need. I'm good.
Okay. Anybody else?
Yes. You want us?
What would you like? A motion to adjourn?
No.
We don't
No, I-
know, motion,
Okay.
but yeah.
Checking. Well, I just, again, I can crunch numbers over the next week. I can start to produce documents that reflect these changes that we've decided on as we've gone through.
Do you want us to kind of just do a peg and say what we're,
If you're, again, I don't know if you're all on board with these percentages as far as voting for a budget next week. If not, is there a way to get closer to that, or I don't know? That's
I'd be okay with it, and I'm very in favor of adding the 2 halftime AP positions back in to get to the 2.26 budget increase.
okay. And 8.59 to that, yeah. And Ally
I
said
also
that.
second that, yeah.
Nope. And so what are your thoughts?
I expressed my thoughts that I'm concerned about a $3 million increase potential.
Okay.
Just estimating next year that we are not thinking, we're just thinking about next year. We're not thinking about the bigger impact. And I don't think that we're yet willing to have the truly tragic, difficult conversations we need to have in the moment of crisis that is public education right now. So, no, I'm not comfortable where we're at. I don't think that you could get me there, in 2 weeks.
Okay.
I do feel like that, we've talked about this, just about, education of like the budget process and starting that much earlier next year. Because we really do need more info about the next 5 to 10 years. We really do need to start planning. So I think immediately, I mean, I know it might not go the way you're comfortable with this year, and that's unfortunate. But I want to make sure this doesn't happen. Like, I want to make sure that by the end of your term, you feel good about what we did here. And I want to make the town feel well. I think 8% is obviously high. So we do need to start addressing those long-term issues, and especially when it comes to maintenance, like we keep talking about the roof that we're going to be replacing soon and stuff. So like, where is that reflected in this budget? Where is?
The roof is in the budget for the Hampton School. It
No,
is
not
not
the
for the $10 million high school that the facility study identified. That is not in the budget.
Exactly. So
And-
that's enough.
This year,
It's not up.
this year.
I know it's not, but when we're talking about long-term, where is the funds that we're, I mean, we could be like keeping reserves that are making interest. We could be making money right now, on our savings. So I want to start talking about that for the next budget season as soon as we can.
And I do want to echo that of just being really clear when we talk to people that the actual budget itself, depending on which number we go with, is either a 2.26 or depending on 2.26 or 1.96 increase to the actual budget. But the effect on taxpayers because of lowered value or increased valuations and less money from the state is where that number jumps. That is not like the budget increased less than inflation. So much less than inflation. It's the other side of it that really impacts this number. And I just want to make sure we all do a really good job of explaining that, because I found in the past years, once people heard that and understood that, it really made a big difference as far as their support in the budget in general, in the work we do.
I did not mean to misspeak on the 8%.
No.
You're right.
The other thing to remember too is that we are not using any fund balance in fiscal 26. We used a lot. We've been using it a lot. We had, just during COVID, we had more than we were allowed to have. And so we have been actively spending that down. But we get to the end of the road there and there is 2.1 million, or 2.2 that, we are not using to buy down the percentage like we've been in recent years. So that's another revenue side thing that we are dealing with.
I just want to say that we have, I think whatever, the 2% increase is remarkable. This is really well done. It really is. The fact that the evaluation is going to put us at 8% is kind of, or 9% is kind of unfortunate, but I don't want us to lose sight of the fact that we have a very high percentage of costs for personnel. We really need to think about that going forward and where we can, there's places we can cut. We need to think about it going forward in the 5 to 10 year plan. I don't care how many plans you have, but that 83%, 17% just isn't enough to make me comfortable for operating 7 buildings, or even 6 buildings. It just makes me uncomfortable. I think we need to be cautious, very cautious. 83% is a lot.
So what are your thoughts on the current numbers?
So
Around the room.
I would just,
The thoughts on the current numbers. I'm trying to continue just for everyone's time.
say, I can't support a budget that high.
Do more.
Oh, yeah.
Could you talk to where you want the cuts to be?
Me? Personnel?
Yeah, so I mean, Denise is looking for guidance for what.
No, I think that we are deadlocked on it as far as the personnel goes. I'm not going to, I think you've done a wonderful job. I think you've tried really hard. I mean, tweak it here. $150,000 made a huge difference in the percentage going out to the taxes. So, just be that 150,000 every time you can cut it 150, but I don't know that you can. So I'm not asking you to. I'm just saying that going forward down the road, we need to be cognizant of what we're spending on personnel and the number of people we bring into the district to. Yeah, I'm done.
So for Denise's clarity, though, there's no way she can do anything that would make you support this budget.
I'm sorry, what?
There's nothing Denise could recalculate, bring back that's gonna encourage you to support this budget.
We did. We already voted.
Oh, sorry. In here.
I didn't hear.
I think, Jerry had
trying to
nod
find-
no and Elva had nod yes? Is that accurate?
Yes, I'm a no.
Okay. And then did Nancy online say anything?
Nancy, what are your thoughts?
You talking to me, Nancy? Which Nancy are you
Yeah.
talking to?
Nancy Newbert, you're up.
Well, which version are we talking about now?
Exactly.
I could support it. I would like to see the principals back in, but if that, if that's a sticking point for some people, then, I can see that too. So I could go either way on that one.
Nancy? I mean, Peg?
I was gonna say.
Yeah, no, I think I already said, I have nothing else I need from Denise. I would like to think, I don't know. I think I'm gonna want the assistant principals back in. I don't think there's anything that's gonna change my mind. But that was my only remaining question, so I don't need anything else from Denise.
Okay, so other than that 150 price point, you guys are gonna think about it and come back next week and try to figure out where you stand on that one.
Correct.
Okay. Are there any other areas that you want more numbers or nothing? It's not gonna, okay. So tonight, the Main Benefits Trust Board is meeting to determine that upper level for medical. And they will tell us tomorrow. So next week, I hope to have some good news.
Everyone sleep with your fingers crossed. Good with us?
Okay?
Good.
All right.
And a huge shout out to all the administrators and teachers and parents that were here last night, to you at the district art show, and then to be back here tonight for another night. We see you. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
You need a motion? You need a motion?